Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the latest episode of the Free Marketeers. Hope you're all doing well. Hello from a chilly Johannesburg. I'm sure for the rest of you around South Africa, of course, it's a very cold week. I hope you're all trying to keep warm as best as you can. These sorts of news episodes, I'm going to try and do at least once a week, maybe more, but I'm going to do the opposite of what politicians do. I'm going to under-promise and hopefully over-deliver, as opposed to the opposite. So hopefully you find these interesting and useful. They'll be pretty short episodes, just giving you, I guess, what I consider to be the main sort of news items of the week, as it were, and just some of my perspective on that. I hope that you find it interesting and useful. So let me know what you think. Please, of course, leave your comments in the description, in the comment section below the video. I hope that you find this time interesting and useful. To jump straight into it, we start with South Africa's unemployment numbers that were released this week. Unfortunately, but expectedly, I suppose, South Africa's unemployment numbers are higher now than they've ever been before. According to the Stats South Africa, the official unemployment rate is 32.6%. The number of unemployed persons therefore is up now to 11.4 million. If you go on the expanded definition, which includes people who have stopped looking for work, South Africa's unemployment rate is now at 43.2%, according to Stats SA. That's a 0.6% of a percentage point increase from the fourth quarter of 2020, unfortunately. And probably the biggest and most concerning part of the unemployment numbers is that youth unemployment is now at 74%. And I think that's very concerning and devastating to find out. But again, that's what happens when we have the policies that we do in South Africa, unfortunately. So 74% youth unemployment. Moving on to the next item, I thought it was maybe funny in a perverse way, but also to be expected in South Africa currently after a decade of state capture and endemic corruption. We had the Special Investigative Unit, the SIU. The head of the SIU talked about personal protective equipment fraud this past week. Now, last year during South Africa's hard lockdown, there were reports of wide-scale PPE looting and corruption as related to the sort of equipment that was supposed to be used in hospitals to sort of look after people and take care of people, used by healthcare workers and healthcare professionals. There was apparently a lot of corruption, looting in that sphere. So according to the Special Investigating Unit head, Advocate Andy Motibi, it was said that the unit is prioritizing investigations into 14.3 billion rands worth of alleged COVID-19 related procurement. And it was also said that, quote, "We've never seen the scale of corruption." I think this is an inevitability. When you have bigger government, you have more corruption. So in a way, we're getting what we sort of asked for. If you want big government to be involved in your life, you're going to have more corruption and looting. So we shouldn't be surprised that we've never seen the scale of corruption before. And the fact that even looting took place during a global pandemic shows you where the government of South Africa is at the moment. Moving on to our next item, we have an article from the Business Day. It was published this morning, actually, at 20 to 7. If any of you have subscriptions to Business Day, you can go and read the article by the editor, Lucanio Mnyanda. And the article is "How S&P Views SA Reforms, All Talk and No Action." So S&P, of course, is a global ratings agency, S&P Global Ratings. South Africa's credit rating is currently in junk, unfortunately. One has different levels of junk, but we are in junk status. So basically, S&P said that South Africa has failed to move on the, quote, "radical change needed to boost the economy, a key requirement for stabilizing the country's debt trajectory." And it gave the prospect of climbing up the rankings ladder quite a low prognosis. According to Ravi Bhatia, a director and lead analyst for the International Public Finance Ratings team, during a presentation on Thursday, it was said that despite a lot of talk, there haven't been reforms. He was also skeptical that the government would stick to its plans for real cuts in public sector wages, predicting that it might be similar to what was agreed in the last round 3 years ago. So the comments, of course, come after an item that I mentioned earlier, the unemployment rate. South Africa is not implementing the necessary reforms quickly enough to really make a dent in those unemployment numbers. Unfortunately, we need, I think, on average, 5 to 6% growth for the next, let's say, 5 years. But at the moment, I don't think we're going to get that anytime soon. And with the direction that government is going in, we have lots of sort of job summits and talks and plans and all this great stuff that government is busy doing. But unfortunately, we aren't seeing the kind of reform that we need. Another big sort of highlight or lowlight, depending on one's perspective, from what S&P said was related to South Africa's state-owned enterprises, such as South African Airways and Eskom. And S&P are skeptical about that objective, about reforming South Africa's SOEs and weaning them off of dependence on the fiscus. While on the face of it, there was a plan to reform, these SOEs are still government-owned and a drain on the fiscus, even as S&P has noted slight improvements in governance at some of the SOEs, such as Eskom. So unfortunately, lots of talk around reform, but we're not really seeing the kind of reform that South Africa needs. From the FMF's perspective, we need reforms. For reforms to be truly radical, we need reforms that will actually improve South Africa's economic freedom and those sorts of outcomes. But at the moment, we are only talking about reforms that are going to increase state control, things like expropriation without compensation, the national health insurance, prescribed assets, nationalizing the Reserve Bank. All of these things are yes, radical, but radical in the wrong direction and not the kind of radical reform that South Africa needs to actually arrest its decline, unfortunately. Our final item for the end off today's little episode is an article from The Economist. The Economist, of course, an international publication. The title is "An Ex-President is on Trial, but Graft Still Blights South Africa." So, of course, the ex-president referred to is former President Jacob Zuma. His case has now gotten started, the case relating to the arms deal back in the 90s that is now in the courts. I think it was postponed till June. But I'll share my screen with you guys here, and you can see sort of what we're going through and what we're talking about, just so that you have an idea of what I have in front of me. So, as you can see here, the journalist from The Economist is visiting parts of South Africa, including Harry Smith, and he talks about how the effects of corruption and state capture are felt most harshly in South Africa's towns, because those municipalities, those parties in provinces have not used the money that they were given properly. It was mostly siphoned off for their own interests and their families, all those sorts of connections. They weren't used to actually improve service delivery for South Africans. So this particular part jumped out to me. Under Jacob Zuma, state-owned enterprises were looted, of course, an estimated 1 trillion rand, about $70 billion, equivalent to nearly 20% of the GDP, was siphoned out of state coffers. Creaking ports and regular power cuts are thought to trim annual growth in South Africa, in sub-Saharan Africa's second largest economy, by 1 percentage point a year. And again, you're not actually going to see improvement in unemployment numbers, for example, if you keep on seeing the sort of corruption that South Africa has become familiar with. To highlight another aspect of this particular article, the municipality, of course, where the journalist is Harry Smith. He points out here that the municipality itself is insolvent. This is also the case in other municipalities around South Africa, in Makanda, for example, as well. I believe that was declared insolvent a while ago. It's interesting here that money is owed to Eskom, of course, but just because Eskom could collect all that money doesn't mean they would actually use it very well. So there's that question of, when you have increased tax collection, does that mean the state actually performs better or not? I mean, this article from The Economist to me jumped out a lot, because if we scroll down a little bit more, there's a clear mention of obviously the state or that municipalities and towns are in, but there's also, if you go a little bit further down, this mention of
community groups like AfriForum, who are trying to sort of take charge of municipalities and trying to fix things. And here, most, I guess, pleasingly, is in Harrismith, a situation where in January 2019, Mr. Twala and another township leader, Willie Chabalala, they visited a faulty pump station, and then they met Petrus van Eden, and they tried to fix Harrismith. So they set up Water Heroes, a grassroots outfit that repaired hundreds of pipes and collected rubbish. And to quote Meneer van Eden, we ran the town for a year and it was clean. This is examples of citizen activism. So citizens across South Africa trying to take charge of what's happening in their communities and their little towns and trying to fix them much better than what the government could ever do. I found the article noteworthy for a mention of cadre deployment, which is a central policy of the ruling party. It also forms part, I believe, of the national democratic revolution that is the guiding ideology of the ANC, the view that the state should control the levers of power, that the state should be managing the levers of power in the country. And this is through various forms, of course, through the SOEs, maybe through banks. That's why we have talk of a state bank being established. It's things like when we get talk now of the post office monopolizing the transporting of certain items that are of a certain weight. I mean, all these ideas boil down to the national democratic revolution and the view that the state should be controlling all of these things, unfortunately. So just a few items to share with you this week. I hope you found this short little episode interesting. As I say, I'll try and do this at least once a week, just 15 or 20 minutes at most, highlighting some of the sort of news items I've seen. Unfortunately, the last item from The Economist is all about, South Africa being in the international news for the wrong reasons. But when one has the wrong policies, you have the destructive consequences. When you have the wrong policies where the state pretends to control people's lives and quote unquote guide society and shape it, then you have negative effects and consequences that result from that. So we shouldn't be surprised that South Africa is unfortunately in this bad state. And of course, this last week, we've all gone through another bout of load shedding. So who knows when that's going to end. Hopefully sometime soon. But again, the view that the state should be the sole provider of electricity, sole distributor of electricity, and it's run into these problems. So the more one can, I guess, identify the ideas and ideology behind these policies, the better able you are to make sense of the world. And hopefully we at the FMF can continue to provide this sort of information and insight to those of you out there who find this kind of thing useful and interesting, and for you to make informed decisions as citizens of South Africa with the country going forward. I will end on that note. Thank you for spending time with me this Friday afternoon. Those of you who have been here live with me, I hope you've enjoyed it. To those of you watching this afterwards, of course, I hope you found it useful. Please leave a like on the video if you enjoyed it. Please also subscribe to the Free Market Foundation's YouTube channel for more content like this in the future. I hope all of you have a good weekend. Stay warm out there. Stay safe as best as you can. And we'll talk to you again very soon. Bye-bye.